What we really need to look at is the performance of that individual when they were men versus the performance of that individual after they've transitioned. And we also have to know what their training status was throughout. So if they're training less after they've gone through a transition, well, that's not a fair comparison because they were training a whole lot when they were men. They decreased their training, or we don't know if they're training the same, and then they transition and they don't do as well. That's not a fair comparison. So what we do have is this. We have, for sure, one example, which is Leah Thomas. Now, Leah Thomas is a trans woman who competed in the 2022 NCAA Division I Swimming Championships. And she won one event, tied for fifth in another, and finished eighth in another event. Now, if we look at how Leah Thomas did during the 3 years that she competed as a man before her transition, she was a pretty mediocre swimmer as it relates to men. So the best example I have is in the 100 freestyle. Her best performance ever would have ranked her around 1,080th amongst the men in that year. And then if we look at that same performance in her 100 freestyle after she transitioned, she went up to 13th on the women's side. So if we're going to call this a fair transition, then any of the men who are going to transition have to be around the same place that they were ranked as men when they transitioned to be women. So if she was 1,080th as a man, she should be about 1,080th as a woman. But you can't possibly look at this and say going from 1,080th as a man to 13th as a woman is a fair transition. So right now what we're saying is there are no drugs in place that are making a difference that are significant enough to suggest that these people are actually like women as it relates to sports. Just that one component, only in sports.
Well, yeah, that's one point, right? And the other, I just remember, like, didn't Trump just decided that trans women in sports is not a thing anymore? I think this year
Well,
they changed. It all started because of the Leah Thomas incident, right? It was the catalyst of
that
everything.
was so that was the biggest one. That
Mm,
was she was the first trans woman to win an event in NCAA history.
yeah.
So that was a big deal. And it caught a lot of people's attention. Now, it wasn't just her performance in the pool.
Mm,
And this is the other point that I make very clearly in the book, is that when we say that the trans women are women, now they're eligible to change in the women's locker room. And Leah Thomas, at the time of the 2022 national championships, had not undergone any type of surgery, to make a full transition in terms of genitalia. So Leah Thomas had testicles and a penis. And all the women who were in the locker room had to be there with somebody who's biologically male.
gosh.
Now, that is really rough as far as I'm concerned, to put a bunch of 18 to 22-year-old women in a locker room with a biological male and say, just deal with it. Any of the people who complained, they were told, you need to go find another place to change. That's just remarkably unfair.
Oh yeah, it must be so
So
uncomfortable.
going back to your point, Trump did pass an executive order that effectively stated that their participation, trans women in sports, is against what we have here in the country called Title IX. And Title IX was a landmark legislation passed in 1972 that guaranteed that women had the same access to sports and education as did men. Now, the left was trying to say that Title IX covered trans women, but obviously Trump disagreed with that, so he passed an executive order to say otherwise. Immediately thereafter, the NCAA switched their rules completely and banned trans women from all sports in
Ooh.
terms of competition only. But they can still be on the team. They can still practice with the team. They can still be in the women's locker room. Those things have not changed. All that's changed is that right now, the federal government says this is against the rules. The problem with that is, just like with Roe v. Wade back in 1973, that was all the Supreme Court saying that this is now the law of the land. However, Congress never actually passed a law making abortion legal, so that when a new Supreme Court came through and passed a new decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, and now in many states, abortion is illegal. Under these same circumstances, if a new administration comes in that views trans women in sport more favorably, they can just do away with that executive order and make their own, and then we're right back to where we started. So in order for this to really be a law that protects women's sports for women only, Congress is going to have to actually pass a law, and that did not happen.
Okay, okay. So basically, we can say that nothing changed.
Well, things have changed at least temporarily, so that's for sure. But it can change right back depending on who's in the administration.
Oh my God. Oh my God. From what
It's
I
it's it's a heavy subject. It's a heavy subject.
Yeah, but it's one that needs to be discussed. Like
Of course,
that's something that I really like about BRUCAST. Like we have people from all around the world with all different topics. Like normally, like not always is the most light one, but I think that's how
hmm
we resolved and advanced the conversation talking about it. We don't need
I
to
agree.
denigrate no one. That's not why you're here. Just I from what it, for at least from my point of view, the point is to find a fair solution for everyone.
hmm
I guess, like, again, going back to the title of the book, an unfair advantage. The goal, from what I see, is to make it fair. Um, so, what are your views on it, Dr. Hutz? How do you think we can make it
So
fair?
the only way to make it fair is for the trans women and maybe men to have their own division or divisions, plural. Now, the primary objection to this is that there just aren't enough trans athletes for that to be something that's going to be fair for the trans women, I suppose. So I have two responses to that. First, bluntly, that's their problem and not women's problem. And two, there are numerous examples of high level competitions with very few